Sweet. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You are live with Joan of Angels, also known as Dr. Joan Hangarter. And this is 420 Spiritual Living. And it's an exciting day for me, by the way. It's the launch of something that's been in my mind and my heart ever since I began listening to the spirit guides of cannabis a few years ago and really feeling their presence. They were just even more powerful than the angels that I work with. And I had a very amazing experience up in Pahrump, Nevada, where I was sitting outside under the sky, having imbued some sacred ganja and asking spirit, like, well, what am I supposed to do with all of this cannabis information and all of my cannabis art? And the next moment, a bird started cawing in the air. It was like 10 o'clock at night and no one was there. And this bird starts cawing in the air about 10 feet away from me and sends a jolt of lightning right through my shoulder and my arm. And sparks were coming out of my finger. And these sparks, guys, were like more than like when you're on a carpet and you make sparks. These were really big sparks. And when I put them on my stomach, my girlfriend said, Joan, your stomach, it's all lit up. I can see your intestines. Now, why am I telling you all that? Because the next morning I had asked the spirits, like, show me what I'm supposed to do with this information. And then came this thing like 420 Spiritual Living. So this idea was brewed in my head several years ago. And so here we are today. And I'm all excited and ready to share this information with you. We are going to be talking over the next few months about how to incorporate plant medicine, cannabis, and other sacred plant allies, psychedelics, and plant teachers to help shift your consciousness and literally awaken your body and, in many cases, heal your body, bring new ways of healing, health, and vitality to your life and to your way of being. So I decided to incorporate a cannabis show because I'm all about miracles. And to me, this is the miracle of the plant, the miracle of plants that talk to us and work with us for peace and harmony. And by the way, I should give you one more minute about my background. And I am Dr. Joan Hangarter. I have been a chiropractor for 42 years. And if you had actually told me that I would ever be doing a show about plant medicine and cannabis, well, first of all, the board would have chased me away. And second of all, God knows, I probably would have been in jail because that was a no-no to talk about cannabis or to even be involved in, quote, that kind of drug. But I've had 42 years of experience of helping people align their body, mind, and spirit to be present, to do their work, to have a great life here on the planet. And when I discovered the healing benefits of this medicine, I decided it was time for me to bring it out under Joan of Angels and Dr. Joan Hangarter. And that is my story, and I'm going to stick with it. Okay, I am going to start to look at comments. We want to know where you are from. So especially if you're new to me or new to the show, please let us know. Well, of course, you're all new to the show, right? I am a comedian already. But put down where you're from, guys, and I'm happy to see you. So we're going to start by taking a deep breath. Remember, I told you that this was starting on 420. And so I want everyone to take a deep breath with me. And we're just going to center for a second before we get into the topic of today, the cannabis and spirituality, plant medicine and spirituality. All right, so take a deep breath in. That is good. Oh, I have so many new friends and old friends. There's Samuel and Nicole and Kelly. It's so nice to see you all. So taking a deep breath in and letting it all out. That's right. Allowing this new state of consciousness to come in and taking another deep breath in and letting it all out. Mother, Father, God, we ask right now for the presence of our guides, our angels, the spirit guides of cannabis, the spirit guides of plants, of plant medicine, the ancient ones, our spiritual tribes, the jaguar, the animals, the little creepy crawlers in the trees, and all of the plant kingdom. Let us just align right now for this hour of time, for a 420 plant consciousness that gives us the grace to have an awareness of who we are, why we're here, in a state of grace. And so it is. All right. And so now, before I started, I pulled an oracle card, and this comes from the Earth Warriors Oracle deck. And the card, I couldn't believe it, of course, and I should never say that. Of course, I could believe it. I was asking for a message for today for each and every one of us and for you and I. And it came out Ixchel. She is the jaguar. It's the medicine of the rainbow jaguar. So I think it's so appropriate to bring on our guest, Stephen Gray, because if anyone could tell us about the medicine of the jaguar and the medicine of spiritual life, it is our guest, Stephen Gray, who goes around the country really sharing how to get into this consciousness of plant medicine in this expanded state. So, hi, Stephen. Welcome.
Hi, Joan.
It's really nice to see you here on the show. I want to leap right in. You and I, when I told you and showed you this card of the jaguar, what did it remind you of? It's a great story.
Sure. I actually really liked your story about the bird zapping you. That was wonderful too.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, my friend saw the bolts of lightning.
Yeah, so this goes back to, I think it was about 1992 or something like that. And prior to that, I'd been at a conference in somewhere around Seattle, I think, actually, on psychedelics, and met a couple of people there. Actually, I can't remember where the conference was, but I met a guy from the Seattle area, and he had a psychedelic group of friends. He was actually on his way he was in process of doing a PhD on psychedelic therapy, sort of kind of ahead of that curve. But anyway, he was in touch, or this little group was in touch with a fellow named Alan Shoemaker down in Peru. Alan's been running a conference down there for the last 15 years or so. And so they invited Alan to come up and do an ayahuasca weekend. So it's 2 nights, Friday night and Saturday night, about, I don't know, an hour or so out of Seattle. And they had a yurt out there to work with. And so he told me about it. I went. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, so I came down from Canada. And excuse me. Well, I don't know how long to make the story, but what the heck?
We have all night. We're going into journey space. Okay.
Right. Excellent. Okay. So the first night it was really mild. He said he was just testing out to see how potent the medicine was, because he had just made it up. There's the two plants that go together to make ayahuasca. So nothing much happened on the Friday night, but Saturday night. So what he did was at the beginning, they have these, for the people unfamiliar with that kind of work with ayahuasca, they have these prayer songs, I guess you could call them, that carry energy and healing and all that. And they're called Icaros in Spanish. And Alan had his little, bunch of Icaros. And then he had this thing that looked a little bit like a whisk broom made out of leaves. It's called a shakapa. And he told us this lovely story about how all over the Amazon, people who never had any contact with each other, they were so far away from each other, many of them had all come upon this particular leaf as a healing thing. And he used it to, when you're doing some healing work, you shake it around the person, and maybe you're singing one of the Icaros at that time. So he also said, if you're having trouble, come on up here. Everybody was lying down around the inside perimeter of this yurt on mattresses. And he put one out in front of him, because for some reason, he would lay down too. He didn't sit up like the way shamans often do, in those ceremonies. But so he said, if you're having trouble, come on up here and I'll do a little healing for you, So this was my first time ever doing ayahuasca. And it came on like a fucking freight train, pardon my French. It was incredibly powerful and chaotic. And it was like somebody had just, opened the back of a garbage truck or something, and all this stuff came flying out. It was like imagery tumbling over imagery. It was so powerful. It was terrifying, basically. I had no idea I was in for something like that. It didn't come on gently at all. So I thought, oh, he did say that I could go up there, right? I was so discombobulated and shaky that I couldn't even walk. And so I crawled across the yurt. I was on the far side of the yurt from him. And I crawled over, tapped him on the knee, and said, you said if you're having trouble, you can come on over, He said, yeah, lie down there. So I lay down on my back, and he pulled out his shikapa, and he sang. He was a beautiful singer. He sang the song and shook the shikapa around my head and shoulders. And after he was finished, he whispered, sit up now. And he whispered into my ear, he said, when that happens, it's your ego hanging on. You have to learn to surrender and trust it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. I didn't actually feel any different. I still felt like weirded out, but then I looked back at my spot across the other side of the yurt and realized I still was too shaky to walk. So I crawled back across the yurt. But when I got about 6 feet or so from my mattress, in no time whatsoever, and I know this was a real experience because I had never experienced anything like it, and probably since either. We're talking almost 30 years ago. I became a large jungle cat of some kind, like a jaguar. That's what got this story going, as we were talking beforehand, obviously. And it was unquestionable. It just took over my whole body, and I went from being this kind of shaky person to being completely relaxed, completely graceful, and in a state of joy, actually. And I'd come with my friend Martin, and he was on the next mattress, and he was lying down with his eyes closed, and I was being super quiet. He didn't hear me, but he felt the energy of this cat, and he sat up bolt upright, and he looked in my direction, and until his eyes adjusted a little, he thought he was looking at a jaguar or a black cat of some kind or whatever, because I was so embodying that. It only stayed with me for I don't know, a minute, 2 minutes, something like that. It just got me to the mattress, and it dropped me off and left me. But for the whole rest of that evening, that night, I was in a state of complete bliss, complete joy. And for what it's worth, I also felt, although I didn't see them, I felt the presence of beings above us that to me felt like I considered them royalty, was the kind of the word that came to me. And I asked them what they were doing, and they were sending me these silent telepathic messages, basically saying, we're sending you folks energy for the work that's coming ahead. And just one more thing, maybe, if I'm not hogging too much of the time here.
It's your time.
Good. It was cold. It was cold in this yurt, or coldish. And so everyone had these down sleeping bags and ski jackets and stuff. And you know how those things make noise when they move, right? They rustle.
Right,
About 3 times or 4 times over the course of these next few hours during the peak period of the ayahuasca, you suddenly, like I'd be really calm and in this joyous state, and I'd start to feel some kind of powerful energy that was making me feel a little restless. And at the same time, everybody in the room had the same experience, and you could tell because all the ski jackets and down sleeping bags started making noise. And Alan would get up when that happened and go around and sing an ikaro, and the energy would all calm down, and everybody would settle down. And it happened about 3 times. And it was somewhere in there that I said, what's going on? And they said, well, we're sending you guys energy, basically, right? In the morning, I asked Alan, I said, were you aware of that? Like, I noticed this thing with the noise. And he said, no, I didn't notice anything like that. He said, I just get this feeling, this intuition that it's time to get up and sing a song. So that was my first encounter with ayahuasca and the totem animal that saved my ass.
Interesting. So interesting. I had that experience with ayahuasca too, where I was listening to the jungle music and suddenly I was racing through the jungle. And it was so powerful and I saw a being on my right in my consciousness, and I knew it was like a spiritual master or a teacher or God of some kind. But I didn't connect to him. But I tried the rest of the night to get back to that state of racing through the jungle, because it was so exciting to live, I guess, to leave my humanness and be part of a different consciousness. And I think when I think of cannabis and consciousness and spirituality and plant medicine, that's what I think of, being able to let go of our logical mind and like feel life in a huge way. So that's, what's been your experience with that?
Oh boy, that's kind of a big question.
We'll break it down.
Yeah. Well,
like, what attracted you to plant medicine to begin with?
Well, actually, I've been interested in a bunch of them, but in fact, cannabis gets a lot of credit for that because it was the first one that was kind of more generally available. I came of age at a time when cannabis was just where I was in Canada. It took a while, it was already had escaped more or less into the culture in the California in particular prior to when it got up to my area. I was in a suburban, very white middle class. In fact, at the time, that particular town, about 20 miles from Toronto, was listed as the wealthiest town in Canada. So it was very white and, narrow kind of world to grow up in. Anyway, cannabis came into it when I was about 17. It wasn't around before that. There was no, in fact, we had to go into Toronto to the village, which was sort of the equivalent of Haight-Ashbury in Toronto, much smaller, to find any. And that was a lovely story, but I don't want to go into it. It was just, like a first encounter with something very different. And I was immediately attracted to it. And for what it's
cannabis.
worth,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the cannabis. Yeah, I thought, oh, this is very different from my white bread, kind of straight ahead white Anglo-Saxon Protestant world that I'd, grown up in up to then. And for what it's worth, also, as far as connecting with cannabis, it taught me some very good things, I would say, over the next few years. Also challenging. It wasn't always good for me, and I could mention that too. But at that time, I mean, because of its amplifying ability, capabilities, and that's often the way I think of it, as a sort of a neutral or non-specific amplifier. So if you're heading in the wrong direction, it'll kind of pick you up like you're a hitchhiker and take you farther in that direction.
You mean if you're having a bad time or a bad experience, it could lower your energy?
Okay. So I was going to tell you about the good things it taught me, and so I'll try to come back to that.
No, let's go back to the good things.
Before, I will tell you this, though, because I think it's actually important for using cannabis. I think of cannabis as an advanced spiritual medicine. For most people, if you think about it, it's hard enough to sit and meditate for half an hour. And when I mean meditation, I'm talking about silent, follow the breath kind of meditation. It's hard to sit down for half an hour and not have thoughts for most people. There's not that many people that can sit for half an hour.
I can't do it.
No.
I get it.
Yeah, and that is the gateway, as the great Persian mystic poet Rumi says, silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation. The silence, being able to quiet the mind, is the ultimate gateway to wisdom in my understanding. It's not my understanding. It's universal, ancient wisdom, right? Buddhism and other traditions. Anyway, so it's hard enough to sit down and meditate and let your mind go quiet under normal circumstances, quote unquote, straight or sober circumstances. Cannabis raises the energy level, it amplifies, and that can make it more challenging. But because it's more challenging, it's also got greater potential to allow you to go deeper into it if you can get out of your head, So I had a lot of issues at that time. It was when I was in university. I had lots of healing to be done, and parts of me that were, I don't know, self-doubting and lacking confidence and that kind of thing, they got exaggerated or amplified under cannabis for a while there. And in fact, it triggered, I'm pretty sure it was this that did it. It triggered a period. It didn't last all that long. I don't know, maybe a year or so of not extreme, but definitely noticeable bipolar condition, where I would swing from being like really, really up and thinking that I was on top of the world. And, I could never imagine that I was ever depressed, or I ever would be again. And then I'd swing, something would be a blow to my ego, that would happen. And then the next thing I know, I'm cycling into a depressive state where I thought, oh God, I'll be like this forever and I'll never be happy again. Right. That swinging pattern went on for a while, and I was using cannabis every day at that point, in the evening generally, but still, I'm pretty sure it did that to me. On the good side, which was more that effect was much stronger than that one that I just mentioned, that was potentially harmful for a time anyway, was that it taught me how to get into the now more. It showed me how to listen to music. I've played music all my life, and it connected me to music in a much deeper way. The first time I ever truly, I don't know. Nobody ever really taught me when I was growing up to completely listen to music and do absolutely nothing else, like just go into it. And, I could make this into a story, but I'll keep it brief. Some friends of mine they were the first people I ever knew that had a really good stereo system. We're talking, late 1960s here, right? They had a great stereo. They were rich, and they had a great stereo system. And the parents were all away, and we're like, I don't know, we're like 17, 18 years old. And we all got high, and they left me alone in the living room and went somewhere else in this big house. So I had nothing to do, and there was music on this beautiful stereo. And I suddenly realized I could hear every instrument. It was a rock band of some kind, so there's, rhythm and lead guitar, bass, keyboard, drums, and singers with harmonies and stuff. I could hear all of it separately and together. And I'd never had that experience. So cannabis really taught me how to listen to music and to connect with music. It also taught me how to dance, or to free myself up and dance. I was coming of age at a time when now they call them the hippies, decided that you didn't need a partner to dance. You didn't need to do dances that had prescribed steps. You could just get up there and let it go. And to me, that was incredibly liberating to do that, and to find that, because I loved to dance, but I didn't know that until cannabis showed me that I could do that. I'll keep this anecdote super brief. I was with some friends at a kind of a little dance where they had a small Celtic trio, doing Irish jigs and reels and all that. And I was kind of shy at the time, kind of reserved physically and whatnot. But we'd smoked a little weed, and we were sitting at this table, and I felt the urge to get up and, kind of fake, a two-step. And I got up and I got completely taken over by it and completely into it, and just was, I probably almost looked like I knew what I was doing, like as if I'd studied this stuff a little bit, and then I came back to the table, and my friends are sitting there with their jaws, about an inch down, going, well, where the hell did that come from? We've never seen you do anything like that before, So it's, to me, cannabis is about channeling that amplification, yeah.
Absolutely. That's a really beautiful story. And I want to address something about those, quote, negative effects, or those other effects, because when I smoked cannabis in college, it actually had a terrible effect on me. And I still hear a lot of people of my generation who have never, ever gone near marijuana, cannabis ever since then, because it was the paranoia. Yeah. And the intimidation. And I was so shy. I'd sit there and it would take me about an hour to say hello to someone. And I replay it over and over and over again in my head. So I actually said hello an hour later. So it didn't really help me. But what I have found out now, what I have found out now is that actually it's how you use the cannabis. And it's, in those days, you only smoked whatever they brought you. And we never smoked anything from Canada, just so you know. I was from New York. We only got, the dealer only had Mexican, or if we were lucky, Humboldt County, They come from California weed or Mexican weed, but never Canadian weed. So I don't know what you guys are doing. But I've learned since then, as I've studied the medical aspects of cannabis, and I'm more familiar with the medical aspects of cannabis than I'm just learning more about the other plants, the shrooms and the psychedelics. But, I've discovered that if you have intention, it's all about the intention you want to create when you work with the medicine. And I want to talk about this a little bit, because I've discovered for me, if I want to be creative, then if I use the kind of plant that helps me be creative, I have a good experience. But if I use the wrong kind, I might fall asleep or, the wrong effect. So that's kind of what I've began to learn about this intentional use of cannabis. And so then I noticed, so how did you go from your recreational use? I'm assuming it was recreational when you were younger. You weren't walking around going, oh, the spiritual aspects of cannabis. But go ahead.
Well, not so much in a direct or literal way, but I was definitely interested in okay, so this is time capsule sort of thing here. That late 60s, early 70s period. People often talk about the 60s, but it, for a lot of people, it bled into the early years of the 70s, as it did for me. Was younger people watching this, please, don't get the idea that I'm kind of glorifying my, time or age group or whatever, my glory days or whatever. But the truth of the matter is, it's not an opinion. There was an incredible explosion of energy going on at that time. It was just a conflagration of factors. It was a combination of the fact that the last great war, so to speak, if you can call a war great, ended in 1945, and it had been preceded by this Great Depression, through the 30s. So the people who survived and lived through that war, they were hell bent on conforming and material security. We're talking about the West, like the North America, Western Europe in particular. And so they kind of hunkered down, and for the middle class people like myself, they created a very secure material environment, but it was really narrow and stultifying in a lot of ways spiritually. And so my generation, that's the other aspect of it. Now they call them the boomers or whatever, these pejorative terms. But at the time, it was just a matter that people came home from the war, and and often the birth rate had gone way down during the war, with soldiers away, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, all these soldiers come back, people settle into civilian life, and they start having, going at it like rabbits and producing babies. And so all of a sudden, starting in 1945, there was a baby boom, and a goodly number of those people came into their late teens, early 20s in the late 1960s. So there was that. And then none of this stuff is all separate from each other. There was an explosion of interest in the psychedelics. All came, Ken Kesey and the gang and all this stuff. You started to hear this stuff. And that also dovetailed into an incredible interest in Eastern spirituality in particular, spirituality in general, including Christianity, but especially Hinduism and Buddhism and, Japanese Buddhism and Taoism and, things like this. And I was interested in all of that, so I was interested in the spiritual aspect of it. I knew I needed healing, and I knew that I did not like, the way our culture was and so on. And cannabis will do that too. It's when you talked earlier, Joan, about, how you didn't like it in college. I want to come back to that a bit more for people, because I think it's really important with cannabis. This, what it does, what it can do to your mind if it's not working for you, if you don't like it. I want to save that one for a minute and just finish up with this, broader notion that there was this incredible explosion of interest in spirituality at the time. And I was interested in the Eastern stuff right away. And I was interested in the spiritual aspects of the psychedelics, including cannabis in a way. As I mentioned a little while earlier, cannabis tuned me into music in a a much deeper way. And one of the things I did for a while was my favorite, musical group at the time was this group called Moody Blues.
Oh my God. Oh my
yeah.
God. I went to see them probably on Cannabis. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, so I used to,
oh my goodness.
Their first 4 record albums,
right.
I had. And they were, not only they made this, beautiful sort of soaring, uplifting music, but they were totally into the whole countercultural zeitgeist, hippie sort of thing.
Yes, they were.
And the spiritual aspect of it. And so their lyrics were about that kind of thing, about spiritual awakening and all that kind of stuff. And combined it, the music, fit that, the music itself fit their lyrical content. And so I had all 4 records, and I had this cheap little stereo, no headphones set to go with it, or the no headphone jack even. But it was it had that little stem thing. You could sit the records on top, and it would drop each one after the other one was finished,
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is really old fashioned, guys.
Oh yeah.
The original record players.
Yeah, that's right. And so I would put all 4 of these records on the stack and, have a few puffs. And then I'd put the speakers up close to me to, pretend that they were, as if they were headphones, get them in close, and then I would listen to, side, 1 or whatever of all 4 of them. And then, 80 minutes later, I'd lean over and flip them over and go through the rest of them again.
Moody Blues. Okay.
Yeah. So, so Cannabis did actually inform my spiritual interest in that way. And then I started using LSD and that sort of thing.
And that's another story. Well, I want to stop you. Go ahead. Okay.
Oh yeah. So before we get too far away from this, I really would like to address this issue of how cannabis can be, a problem for people a little bit more, So when I mentioned earlier that I think of cannabis as a challenging and advanced spiritual medicine. If you're really, looking to awaken with it and in that way, because of its, raises the stakes of its amplifying capability. And so one of the things it does potentially is if you are having self-sabotaging ideation, thinking, it will often exaggerate those, amplify them out of all perspective, and you end up taking them way too seriously. So that's not healthy for a lot of people. There's been discussion about how some people think that it could cause schizophrenia. Well, it's been shown that it does not do that. But what it can do for this very reason is it can bring on sooner a latent type, mental illness that's, just sort of waiting there to be triggered because of the fact that it amplifies that kind of negative or self-harming ideation, right? And that ties into the paranoia, because really what paranoia is, it's fear with a story, And so it's all about oneself. It's totally self-absorbed, It's all about what could happen to me, right? And
which is again, a terrible state to be in.
It is. And that's why cannabis needs to be understood properly as a spiritual medicine, because if you don't know what you're doing, and if you don't know that, and you're not doing it, as you mentioned yourself a little while ago, with intention and the right kind of circumstances of where you feel comfortable and safe, and then, as I said earlier too, getting out of your head as much as possible, you can buy into these negative thoughts, and it can be harmful. And I've heard people say that they think that it triggered them into a mental illness, young people, teenagers, adolescents. So much of it, has to do with understanding that it's like hopping on a powerful train, and you have the choice which track you take, So, so like I said, if you're just doing it so-called casually, and especially if you're if you're vulnerable or sensitive, which most of us, if not all of us, are on some level, some a lot more than others in a general sense, of course. But that's another way that I think of cannabis as a truth serum. It exposes the truth, it exposes things. And again, if you take them too seriously and you aren't able to let them go and love yourself for whatever thoughts come up, that kind of thing, then it can cause trouble. And, I've talked to people like you talked to, that they used it when they were that age, and they've never wanted to use it again for that reason. like, I'll just tell you super briefly, a guy that I know, like an amazing guy. He works, he's very comfortable with lots of psychedelics. He's a policy advisor for trying to get psychedelics legalized in Canada. He won't use cannabis because when he was in his early 20s, he was with some friends and they swam out to this island, or something, and they got high, and he got totally paranoid about swimming back. Right.
And he thought, I could feel that. Yes.
Yeah. He thought, I don't need anything like this. And I thought, well, but that's the very power of this plant that you have to channel to make it a beneficial spiritual ally. And then if you know how to stay relaxed with it, let the energy move, and get out of your head, or not buy into those thoughts when they come up. When I say get out of your head, I don't mean fighting with the thoughts and trying to push them away. This is basic Buddhist teaching, by the way. Buddhist universal principle is that our busy mind creates a kind of an ink cloud or obscuration from ultimate unconditional reality. And so you don't fight with them, you just observe them. And then when you notice that you're in your head, you can let it go, right? And so cannabis to me is just, like meditation in that way. It just can deepen the meditation. And that's for my mind, as a spiritual ally, that's where it's most useful. That's how to work with it, as I understand it. Not that you should never do anything else with it or whatever. It's a very kind and flexible medicine. It'll allow you to do lots of different things with it, as long as it's working well for you and you don't become overly dependent on it. That's another issue for me. I think if it's working for you, if you like it, if it does this wonderful enhancement, makes things taste better and music sound better and making love better, whatever, you can get really dependent on it. And that's a whole other topic. But I think
that's another subject, right?
I think that potentially that may not be good for a lot of people. It can, result in a kind of an addiction, a psychological addiction. Yeah.
So this is very fascinating to me because your Buddhist and your spiritual philosophy incorporated your use of different plants to sort of help you get into that consciousness. When I was 23, I found a spiritual teacher on the West Coast, and I moved to Los Angeles to an ashram, the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, and the teacher was John Roger. But in order to do that, you could not use any plant medicine. You couldn't use cannabis or cigarettes. Okay, so you had to be, I guess you could drink yourself, whatever, but you couldn't use any of that. So I detoxed from everything, and I moved to California because I believed that. And I never ever went back to touch anything till like after I really had my active practice for years. But I was exhibiting my art a year ago, my cannabis art, because now I paint a lot of, in addition to angels, I do canna angels. All right. So I was exhibiting my art, and this woman who calls herself a spiritual teacher here in Coachella Valley comes up to me and she starts badmouthing. She says, well, that cannabis lowers your spiritual frequency. And if you think you're going to, get up to those heavenly realms, those spiritual realms, you're in for another, you're in for a big surprise. She was so negative. And I realized when I started talking about doing a show on the spirituality of cannabis that this is really important, because a lot of people have been told that it's not spiritual to use plant medicine or cannabis.
Yeah.
And so I like your whole teachings about how to shift that.
Well, that's I don't know. It's a complex topic in a way. And
it is. Yes.
I have a few views or opinions about what you've just said. One of them is that a lot of these people, these spiritual teachers, they haven't had those experiences. And so they're not really qualified to speak of them,
Yes. Oh my God. They're not qualified to speak of that. They're not.
No, I think that's the case. Some of them have had and think that, there's maybe a danger of people relying on them too much. I mean, you're not going to rely, for the most part, you're not going to rely too much, you might say, I think anyway, on, most of the so-called major psychedelics, because they're not something that like cannabis, where you could get into a habit of doing it daily, or, you're not likely to be doing mushrooms every day, or ayahuasca, or acid, or peyote, or
For most
wachuma.
of us.
Yeah. So, I don't think, what was I saying? I kind of lost that one. Basically, that's one of my views, is that those people who say that, they don't exactly know, they're not fully informed, by the experiences themselves. For example, even MDMA, I mean, which is not technically a psychedelic, it's an empathogen, and it's not an ego dissolver in that sense.
Right.
But I have a book, I can't remember which book it is now, where they talked with they gave some MDMA to some monks or whatever that had been meditating for 30 years. And this, stories were coming out. Like one guy said, well, I felt like I had a deeper meditation with this than anything I've ever had in 30 years of silent meditation. Right. So where it gets really tricky, though, in that sense, I mean, okay, so let's get one thing out of the way. Houston Smith, the great religious scholar who wrote one of the iconic books that was used in universities for years and years on the world's religions, I forget the title of it, said that it's clear that psychedelics can produce religious experience, which I would, translate that as a spiritual experience, essentially.
Right.
It says much less clear that they can produce a religious life, or in that spiritual life, in that sense, because you have to bring all those insights back into your daily walk. And I think, frankly, this is a bit of a tough topic in a way, but I think, quite frankly, in the psychedelic community, the evidence shows that a lot of people are not really doing that. You can do 100 ayahuasca sessions and you can have the same issues as you had when you first did them, or maybe not all the same emotional issues, but you haven't softened your ego. You might even have gotten more egotistical, or think you're, like there's these terms like spiritual bypassing or spiritual materialism these days, that you think you're sort of above people because you've had these experiences. So it's not, on some level, about having the experiences. It's about what you do moment to moment.
And process. So I think it's also, though, who you're doing the experiences with.
Absolutely.
Or what shamanic team you're working with. So,
yeah.
And your intention. And yes, different groups have different intentions and different experiences. So with the group that I work with, who have saved my life, I'm painting angels because, of the awakening that I have. God, she says that one evening with plant medicine, the right medicine for you, very specifically dosed and fixed for you, can heal like 10 years of your life. Like it's like 10 years of therapy.
Yeah.
And so there is that track. And I get that. And you can incorporate a spiritual life, though. You can bring back. So when I was told to call it 420 spiritual living, it was with the idea that through cannabis, in particular, plant medicine, it brings an awareness, a consciousness, where now more things in my life have meaning or ceremonial to me. I love exercising with cannabis, or yoga, or meditating with cannabis, because it makes it more expansive for me and more meaningful. So I do believe you can. I think cannabis is the easiest one to incorporate into a spiritual life.
Yeah.
In a sense, because you can still function and function very, very well, as opposed to, the others.
Absolutely.
And that's been my experience. But still, it's the intention of how we do it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, part of what you're talking about is this, wonderful term, set and setting, right? Set being all your intention and, who you are and all that sort of thing. And then setting being the actual circumstances of the situation that you do the medicine in. And I've long felt that it's important or valuable for cannabis, but that cannabis is more flexible in terms of the setting in particular. Not necessarily the set, if you really want to use it as an awakening medicine, which it can be, but setting, if you're going to take a large dose of ayahuasca, you do not want to be wandering around in the forest, right?
Well, you can't. Right.
No, but with cannabis, you can, you can go out into a forest if you feel safe, on a lovely day or whatever, and you can have a puff, and, sit there, walk around, whatever, you're going to be fine. Right. And in fact, cannabis loves nature in that sense, and it just can deepen your connection to the trees. Maybe you get lucky and even have them communicate with you a little bit, like some people do.
Right.
Yeah. So whereas the major psychedelics, and the way I use cannabis, I kind of think of cannabis like I do with the so-called major psychedelics as well, which is that you drop into this, I don't really use it now, in this part of my life. I don't use it frequently. I use it like once or twice a week, and I always do it in a meditative way now. I don't use it for, just kind of casual things in general, just because I prefer to go deep with it and have those experiences once in a while. So I do use it as a kind of a psychedelic these days, and challenge myself,
you use cannabis as a psychedelic.
Cannabis, yeah. I use it as,
beginning to hear about this.
I want to go deep with it. I don't use it for these light kind of, just slight shifts of things generally. That's just I'm not saying anyone else should do this. This is the way I do it. And so for me, cannabis is like a psychedelic that way, in the sense that you visit these places and you get downloads, or you get teachings, you get shown things, and then you bring them back into your daily walk. And ultimately, there's sort of no goal. There's no there on some level. There's no place to get to, and you're not going to go through your life under the 16 hours a day under the influence of some plant, even if it's cannabis. I don't think that's doable or functional particularly. Maybe for some people it is, but it's not about getting comfortable. That's not the ultimate goal. I used to go to the Native American church peyote ceremonies, and this wonderful old guy that ran these meetings, they called them roadmen. He said, "Hey, relatives, you did not come here to get comfortable. You came here to get strong, like spiritually strong, right?" So, I don't particularly favor, and I don't want to be too limited about this. As I say, on one level, I don't care what people do with cannabis. I hope they're not harming themselves, but it's their life, But I don't really support, from my point of view, using cannabis as what I would call a palliative, just to make yourself feel a little more comfortable. I think its greatest potential is as something that opens you up to spirit, and also shows you the truth of things.
I love that. Yeah. It opens us up to spirit, and in a bigger, from what I'm hearing from you, in a bigger way, in a more meaningful way that even religious teaches. And I know that cannabis has been used for centuries, thousands of years, for health, wealth, and happiness.
Absolutely.
I broke it down to the big top three: health, wealth, and happiness. And the idea that people feel afraid of it is really actually more because of the way it was presented to us. You're going to die, reefer madness. You're going to go on to be, to not use psychedelics, but heroin. And before you know it, they'll be picking you up off the street. And that's what we were told, growing up. But, the other thing about cannabis that I love is that not only can you have a spiritual experience, but you can have a healing experience. Your body can literally be healed because as a chiropractor, I'm very much into plant medicine of all kinds, teacher plants and adaptogens and plants that help heal us instead of pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, absolutely.
So honestly, I think cannabis is a one-stop shop. Because I don't want to get myself kicked off the airways for this, but I think it's where else can you take something for your post-traumatic stress syndrome and you find you're happy? You're not only less anxious, but you're happy.
I'm always a little bit wary of people who get sort of too gung-ho fundamentalist about, cannabis. I think that's always often a little bit suspicious about anything. It's like as if you found a new religion or something. However, I think very much from a grounded place, like a not like exaggerated, making a case for it place, you can make a very legitimate case that there is no planet that does all the things that cannabis does on this planet. There is no one other plant that does any of that, all this stuff.
They can't prescribe you a pill that does it.
No.
They can't heal your body with anything pharmaceutical at all.
No. A medicine that can open your spirit, open your heart, can calm you, can relax you, can show you the truth of things, and can also heal you. There's no other plant, I don't believe, on this planet like that. This is our plant. It's the people's plant. It's here, for that reason. I guess it might have its own life to live as well. It's probably happy. It's like, oh my God, this is wonderful for my species because we're getting around here.
I call it a gift from the gods.
Yeah, well, and maybe as I was saying, that it thinks that we're a gift to it, for keeping it going like that. And the thing is, that the medical healing that it does, I think, I'm not a doctor, this is just a layperson speaking. I think that is the same function, the same thing that it does that opens the spirit, because it has a physiological effect like that. One of the contributors to my book, Cannabis and Spirituality, is Joan Bellow. Yes, who's written a few books.
Show it too in a minute.
Oh, cool. She has written a few small books. One of them is called The Benefits of Marijuana. Way back in the 90s, I think she wrote this one. And she talks about the pharmacokinetics of cannabis, the physiological effect of it coming into your body and what it does. And it at first speeds up your heart a little bit. So your heart is pumping stronger. And it's sending freshly oxygenated blood throughout the whole system. So it's opening up what she calls the skeletal muscles, relaxing them, and it's sending this healing energy, allowing oxygen. Air is our God, and oxygen, or the breath, is like our God in that sense, right? And it's allowing it to get more deeply into all the extremities.
Oh
yeah, there we are. We're back. Yeah, no worries. And so that's the same thing that's opening up your mind in that sense too, right? So anyone who says, like, this person you mentioned that, cannabis is lowering, your spiritual vibe. No, it can if you use it wrongly like that and overuse it and depend on it too much. But it's not an accident that there's no other system in our body like the endocannabinoid system.
Right.
And that exocannabinoids like cannabis just lock right into that system as if it's like, oh, you're home, darling,
Like it's been waiting for it for
yes.
centuries.
Oh, my dear, you're here again. Let's dance, Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway.
When I did that online cannabis conference, that's what I realized. I hadn't put two and two together, that hemp had been around forever in everything, in our clothing, in our fabrics, in our, everything around us. And then suddenly it was illegal. And now our bodies were deprived of cannabinoids, which is probably why we had an uptight society. I'm sure of it. Right. But yeah, you're so right. It's like being home, and it's just so healing. Stephen, this has been fascinating, really fascinating. I want to show everyone, first of all, when I realized that I was given the title by the bird, we're going to call it by that spiritual awakening, bird awakening, and they said 420 spiritual living, I went, okay, well, spiritual cannabis and spirituality, what is that about? Because I hadn't actually thought of it. And so Stephen's book, how Google is, he was the first one to show up, and I ordered the book. And when I launched this conference and produced it, I thought, okay, if he would talk to me, he's the one in the field. And sure enough, he actually answered my call. But he's got several other books. He wants all of us to know that he's not just about cannabis. It's about spirituality in all forms and the kinds of plants that really take us there. Okay, let's see. So I wanted you guys to see that, to see his other books. And Stephen, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you?
Right here.
Oh yes, every week. No, you have a group on Facebook.
I'm here.
Right?
I hardly ever leave. It's COVID, I don't go anywhere. Yeah.
Well, there's that
Yeah.
true. That is
Yeah.
true. Didn't you tell me you do work online though, and conferences and journeys online?
Yeah, not a lot, to be honest. But occasionally, I do online cannabis ceremonies, and that started with the COVID. Before that, I did them live, with people in a circle, and then we started doing some online when we couldn't really do that anymore. So I'll be going back to that. Once that once we're comfortable with having groups in the same room here, and they're very careful with all this in British Columbia where I live here. They're not encouraging people to get together in those kind of situations quite yet. But when we do, I don't know for sure if I'll continue having the online as part of it or not, but I may, just because I work with this other guy who's we also co-organize this conference, Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, that's in its 10th year. So Mark likes to do the things online, so we might. Anyway, people can reach me. I have a website, StephenGrayVision.com, and the Stephen Gray is spelled STE. Well, he's probably got it all there. Yeah, that's my spelling of my name. Yeah, good for you. It's right there. Thank you. I have one thing I've been doing this last year or so, which I'm quite, I love doing, is interviewing leading figures in psychedelics. So I have a YouTube channel called also Stephen Gray Vision. So Stephen Gray mushed together, vision as a separate word. I rarely, but once in a while, put a little something on Instagram. Right now, I'm not really using any of the other particular social media channels. There's contact information on the website and Facebook, also called Stephen Gray Vision. And I put a lot of different things on there. And that's how, if we do any of these online cannabis ceremonies, that's where it would go. And also on the Spirit Plant Medicine Facebook page is where we always put, I'm an admin on it. That's my partner that we do the conference, blah, blah. So anything we do goes on there as well. So yeah, any of that. I could, if somebody's really sincere, sometimes I feel, mixed feelings about giving out my email address, but I'll trust that the people watching this that would want to contact me are sincere. They're not, they're not doing it for any weird reason or to hook me up to some nefarious, mailing list or, whatever, try to sell me penis enlargement technologies or, that if they want to contact me, it's for a good reason. So I'll tell you my email address it's StephenGrayMedicine@gmail.com.
Interesting. Stephen Gray Medicine.
Yeah.
At gmail.com. Okay, I like that. You
Stephen Gray Medicine at gmail.com. Yeah.
Beautiful. Stephen, so the time just really flies whenever we're chatting. And I just so excited to have you on, to work with you, to hear your philosophy, it's really delightful. And I just I know all my audience appreciates you also, a new awareness of what cannabis can do for you.
Sweet. Yeah. And yeah, it's been lovely speaking with you, Anne, and Joan, and hearing your stories too, because you've got loads of interesting stories as well. Yeah.
I have a lot of interesting stories too. And okay, Stephen. So we will see you next time. And I so appreciate you. Thank you.
Pay attention to the birds, folks.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. So it was a real bird. So wasn't Stephen wonderful? If you could all just give a psychic kind of clap so he can feel it. The one thing about being online, especially for us speakers or even for Stephen who likes to be in groups, shamanic circle where you could touch people, online is the best. So kindly thank him and send hearts, please. So he'll just know how much we loved him. Guys, this is the beginning of a new series, 420 Spiritual Living. I'd love your opinion on it. I was thinking we should start at 4, and then at 420 break for a little 420 ceremony. But I'd love to hear your feedback on that, and I'll be looking at all the comments. But meanwhile, think about what we've said, that you can use cannabis for healing. You can use cannabis for spiritual upliftment. You can use it for balance and harmony. You can use it for yoga. You can use it to deepen your meditations. So thoughtfully and well conceived of, you can have what I like to call a plant medicine, a 420 lifestyle, a 420 spiritual life with intention, consciousness, and awareness. And so that's my work. And I'm delighted that I'm bringing the Cannabis Angels to you. I'm working on a little video. And as soon as I get the shamanic music in it, you'll see it. But it's just my heart's desire and sharing this. So I look forward to all your things, all your comments. Next week, now I've confused everyone, 4 or 420, waiting to hear your feedback. We're going to have Bree Wolf, and Stephen actually wrote the foreword to her book. And Bree is also going to talk about cannabis and spirituality and really talk about a lot of the tools that she uses, because it was between Stephen and her that I realized they're using cannabis psychedelically. So guys, the sky is the limit. We want to hear how you use cannabis. Go and join my Facebook group if you haven't, 420 Spiritual Living, and comment. And also on my YouTube channel to like and share that Joan of Angels page. And we will see you next week. And I'm just so happy. And sign up on my email list if you haven't, Joan of Angels, and we'll find you that way. All right, have a blessed and fantastic day, everyone. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.